is Chad McDaniel with Execs in the Know. Welcome as people are starting to dial in. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how data analytics can turbocharge your chat program. And we're looking forward to today's presentation with Leslie Joseph from 24/7. And we'll get started here just in a couple of minutes. But again, thank you for joining. Hope everyone's doing well. So as I see people are still dialing in, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, my name is Chad McDaniel. I'm the president and founder of Execs in the Know. And Execs in the Know is, we've been around for about 15 years now. We're really an advocacy group for the customer management executive, like most of our listeners on the call today. I will remind everyone at the end of the webinar today, you will all receive a link which will have a kind of a post-webinar survey. You are our customers. I'd love to hear your feedback from today's discussion and discovery. And also tomorrow you should receive an email that will include the recording of today's session along with the actual deck and presentation. So I'll make sure all of you receive that today. But happy July for everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to talk about. If we could go to the next slide here. I basically want to welcome all of you for today's session. And with today's session, we're going to talk about getting fit with chat. And it's going to be a very detailed discussion that I personally enjoy chat as a service channel. I use chat all the time as my first channel of choice if I'm looking to service any of my interactions with the brands I interact with. So this particular topic is near and dear. A little bit about Execs in the Know. As I said in the beginning, we're a global community of about 50,000. There's a lot of ways that we're trying to help the advocacy of the customer management executive. If you've not been to our website, execsintheknow.com, I do encourage you to go there. We have some great data and insights and benchmarks and reports and other recordings from other conversations. And if there's anything I can do to help with you in your journey of customer success, you always can email me directly, chad@execsintheknow.com, or feel free to reach out to us on our website. But with that said, if we go to the next slide here, Leslie, I'm going to introduce you here shortly, but Leslie, you and I have worked together before, and you just are a wealth of information. Really appreciate, Leslie, I know how busy you are, and having you part of today's discussion. So that means a lot to me. I want to personally thank you, and Leslie, it's great to have your insights. For you that may not know Leslie Joseph, he is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at 24/7. Leslie, I know you have, I think, over 14 years of experience in overall marketing enterprise software products and services. You've got a tremendous amount of data set that you're going to be able to share with our listeners today. I think you've worked, Leslie, if I'm right, in the consumer experience space with brands that have been at the forefront of digital customer engagement and user experience design. You get a chance, Leslie, to see things from many different lenses and views, so I think the rich insights that you're going to be able to share with us today is going to be quite special. And then finally, I think, Leslie, as your role as Senior Director of Product Marketing, I think you run all the product strategy and go-to-market for the 24/7's products and solutions that empower assistant consumer experiences. So, Leslie, it's appreciate to have you. You and your organization 24/7 have been great business partners of Execs in the Know, and really trying to help the overall industry grow and learn and advance the customer success when it comes to multi-channel customer engagement. So without that, further ado, Leslie, I'd like to just say, let's get started. We've got a great conversation. We're looking to get in shape today with some chat fitness, and welcome.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks a ton for that great introduction. And good morning, everyone. Thank you guys all for joining. And a fair warning before we begin. So this presentation, since it's about chat analytics, it does have its fair share of charts and graphs, and I am going to geek out a little bit on some of the live examples of data analytics that I have in the slides that follow. So if you think I'm geeking out a little too much, I apologize in advance, but I trust that that's what you folks are here for anyways. So before we begin, a little bit of context setting. So at 24/7, we really believe that the future of chat is is about 4 key pillars, and these are the themes. These are the 4 themes that we think customer experience leaders such as yourselves should be really thinking about the chat channel in terms of these themes. And these are, firstly, the chat channel is not going to be its own siloed channel just existing on a website. Instead, it's really going to extend. It's going to be woven into other channels such as the IVR or social, native apps, even the store, or outbound email communication. Chat is really going to be an organic part of all of these channels. It's going to be woven in, and it's going to surface at the right point and in the right time intelligently and in the right format when the customer needs it the most, and when they need it in the format that they need it the most. So that's the first pillar. The second is really all about data, and we will be talking a lot more about this in a bit, so I will park it for now. The third pillar relates to design, and that's really about creating delightful, engaging and effective chat interactions and chat engagement with the customer. And this really transcends visual design, and it goes into the use of things like behavioral analytics and data-driven design to craft the chat experience. And the fourth is digital agents, which is our term to define the chat agent themselves and their relationship with technology and with data and with analytics. And look, if all of these pillars, if they were all on an NFL team, then really data would be the MVP. Data is the one unique capability which influences all the other pillars. It really, it's core to understanding consumer journeys within the web channel. So when customers cross channels and when their interactions become omni-channel, data is what kind of binds these channels together and allows you to look at them as a single journey across channels. It also informs design, so data-driven design, which I talked about. And then the chat data analytics, it really forms a core platform on which you can look at agent performance and agent effectiveness, and you can enhance these things. So really, at the end of the day, data is really everywhere. And for you specifically, understanding how to manipulate this data, how to use it effectively, this has to be a core part of your chat program, no matter where you are in terms of chat maturity. So fitness is our theme for the day. So if you're at this point signing up to get into shape, you have to assess where your starting point is. And at 24/7, we really view this in context of a broader chat maturity framework that defines where a company is in terms of the overall impact and potential of their chat program. So what I'm going to show you now is a simplified slice of the chat maturity framework. This is really focused on data leverage. So what I'm trying to show you is the typical stages that companies fall into and what the focus should be at each stage and how you would leverage data and analytics to move from this stage to the next. So as a beginner, if you're just starting out, what you will primarily be using as your data sources will be things like weblogs, right? So Omniture or Google Analytics or whatever web analytics tool you use. And then also, you'll probably be using the basic chat reports that your platform provides you. Sometimes you will also manually read things like chat transcripts or agent disposition text. Now, you know that agent disposition is really the term for the notes that agents attach to a chat once it's finished, once the chat is ended. And so what you could do is you could actually start training your agents to write type certain qualifying keywords or key phrases in the disposition, so you can later search for chats that have these disposition terms in them. And at this point, look, you don't really need very specialized tools. Your chat program is probably just run using business rules. So a majority of your focus is really going to be on optimizing these rules to improve performance. So then we transition to intermediate, and in the intermediate stage, you'll really have to start looking at more and more complex, more sophisticated business rules to support your business needs. But the other option is you probably will actually start moving away from business rules entirely, and you'll start leveraging predictive models as a superior alternative to business rules. And really at this point, chat analytics starts involving some form of text mining, so you'll really need the relevant tools to be able to mine unstructured data like a chat transcript. And these kind of techniques and these kind of tools will supplement the traditional structured analytics that you started with in the beginner stage. And then the third stage is advanced. And if you're an advanced chat program, look, really, this is where things get real, right? So you'll still be performing a lot of the text mining and unstructured data analytics that you've done in the previous stages. But what you'll start doing is, at this point, you'll start moving away from doing all of this in retrospective, in post facto, and to kind of applying all of this in real time. You will start using data to span multiple channels and not just looking only at chat or only at web as one specific siloed channel. And at this stage, you'll really start using data from other channels, from web, from IVR, even data from your voice agent channel. All of this, you'll start mashing this data up to come up with insights that really cross-channel, that are really omni-channel and pivoted around the individual customers and their individualized intent. So at this stage, you'll probably start feeling the need for advanced data-focused customer experience technologies that will actually help you and allow you to apply some of these tools and capabilities.
Leslie, I'll go back to that slide real quick and sorry to interrupt, but you work with many client organizations, and I guess it depends on the vertical, but where would you say in 2016 most organizations are at right now if you had to kind of average it out, beginner, intermediate, or advanced? What would be your thoughts here in 2016?
Honestly, so if you had asked me this a year ago, I'd have said that a lot of them are in beginner moving to intermediate, but over the last year, I've seen a lot of interest in a lot of companies to start pushing the boundaries, especially now as they start seeing omni-channel. So omni-channel has been one of these buzzwords that has been around for ages, but nobody's really wrapped their head around it. But now with the kind of technologies and the kind of capabilities and data techniques that are available, people are actually starting to see the value of really stretching towards omni-channel, and so that's driving a lot of interest in some of these capabilities that are pushing people more towards the intermediate and towards advanced. So I think a lot of the clients that we work with today, they're more in the intermediate territory than they were last year, but we're definitely on a strong roadmap to move them forward. And the best part is that you can actually, with the technology that exists today, you don't really have to go through the entire pain of kind of transitioning, evolving through these stages. There are specific ways in which with the right kind of guidance and the right kind of support, you can leapfrog some of the more painful parts of these stages. So that's one of the things that has also become pretty apparent over the last year.
Okay, no, thank you for that, and I know we got a lot more to talk about here, but I appreciate that insight and perspective.
Cool. So again, metrics. So look, every fitness program, since we are sticking with the metaphor, it needs a goal, right? So you need metrics, and what we have in here is a way to classify some of the metrics that you come across. So there's efficiency metrics, which are the typical contact center metrics focused on agents and on chats and that kind of stuff. There's funnel metrics, which relates directly to your chat funnel and the different stages of the funnel and the efficiency with which you're able to transition your consumers, your visitors through these stages. And then, of course, there's business metrics. And these are the ones that really matter. These are the ones that you and your executive leadership, what they ultimately care about. So, revenue, cost, customer experience, and related metrics. And so one thing to remember here, and the only thing that you should take away from this slide, I know it's a bit of a bunch of stuff here, but what you really need to remember is that you can't really improve everything. So what you need to do is you should focus on the business metrics that are most critical to you at this point, and then try to identify the others that affect these primary metrics. So, for example, if your business goal is to deflect calls, or which in turn leads to lower cost of service, then that often enough, it depends on first contact resolution, and that in turn is partly a factor of out-of-scope chats. So once you know how these metrics are connected, if you focus on just improving your out-of-scope chat number, then that itself should eventually affect a lift in your primary metric, which is your cost of service. So you really need to understand how these metrics are all interrelated and what the levers are and what the final, the ultimate metric is that you're trying to impact. So given all of this, here's our recommended approach to chat fitness, and it's really simple to describe. It starts with the data. It's about collecting data from all the different sources, and it's about instrumenting your systems and your processes, and in a lot of times even your agent training to be able to gather and store and manipulate this kind of this data. And then the data itself can both be structured or unstructured, but your goal while analyzing this data is really to identify the nuggets of hidden insight that is contained in this data, which will allow you to make a difference to the metrics that you've chosen. And this kind of needs to be this continuous loop of action to measurement, which eventually drives the outcomes and continuously enhances the outcomes that you're able to achieve over time. So while this is a very simplistic, simple framework, it's something that we will try and follow through with the examples in this deck, so you see how this works in practice. All right, so let's get started. So stage one, if the slide will advance. Chad, okay, I got the slide to advance. So stage one is for beginners, and here, like I said before, we are largely talking about basic web analytics. So I have an example of this retailer, for example, that looked at their Google Analytics data, right? And what they were trying to do was to understand how and where they should be offering chat. So they looked at their page funnel across different referrers and different offers. I'm just showing you a small sample of these, and I've obviously anonymized the referrers, but the data is real. So when they looked at all of the funnel performance across all of these different referrers, they were able to identify for each unique referrer and each unique offer the most likely drop-off point for customers in that whole process, from the home page to the cart to the checkout process. And so based on this, once they knew which pages and which spaces, which page categories the drop-offs were maximized on, they were able to then offer chat or make chat offers more prominent on these pages to support the customers who were typically dropping off at that point. And as a result, they were able to improve conversion. So I'm going to show you a slightly more advanced example. What we call this is, we call it pathing analysis. And again, this can also be done using just your Google Analytics or whatever web analytics data alone. So what you do is you look at each category of page along the purchase path, from home to product to cart, checkout, and order confirmation. And so each page is a step in the journey, but you analyze each of these steps independently, and when you start modeling traffic into and out of it, you're able to achieve something that an example of which I have in the bottom. And what we are looking at in the bottom is a double click into the product page on the top part of this diagram. So this is the product size selection page, which is a sub page under the product category. Now, what you're seeing here, the green, the teal arrows and the teal flow, this is something we call the golden journey, which is the ideal journey that you want your customers to follow towards whatever your desired outcome is. Now, this outcome could be a sale, it could be a sign up or a request for contact, or whatever it is that you define as a successful outcome for this particular customer journey. So every single path or every single customer who does not follow the golden journey is a deviation, and you want to prevent deviations, right? Because you want ideally the customer to find the fastest path to the desired outcome that you can possibly provide or he can possibly find. So what you might notice here in this particular diagram is that almost half the visitors, that's about 49% of the visitors, they're leaking off the page and completely off the site from here. So you might want to think about why that's happening. Or maybe you notice that in a different page, a lot of the customers are regularly going off the golden journey to visit a non-related page. So that's a good reason to kind of probe into that and try and understand whether they're looking for a specific kind of information that is found there in the other page, but which you could additionally be providing in the page that they're leaking off from. And so when you look at the entire path, you'll find several leakages across pages, small or big, and then you can take a very informed call on where you want to apply chat interventions versus where you just want to tweak the website to show additional information and stem these leakages. So we've done this kind of analysis for a bunch of companies, the specific retailer where we worked on the service side, and just through insights from this kind of golden journey mapping, we were able to reduce the number of voice transfers from chat by about 8%. Now that said, pathing analysis is going to tell you what's going on with your visitors, but it's not going to tell you why that's happening. And for that, you have to level up, right? So let's go to the next level, which is the intermediate stage. And this is where things are really heating up, because the why is really all about data analytics, and it starts using text mining, chat mining as a technique. So let's talk about chat mining. What is chat mining? Excuse me. So chat mining is a subset of text mining, and it's basically a bunch of techniques and tools that allow you to use algorithms to mine unstructured text. And when I say unstructured text, I mean like a chat transcript. And so you can mine these chats and you can extract insights from them. And this is important because while, as an individual, as a human being, you can read a chat transcript and you can maybe tell where it went right or where it went wrong. But try doing that at scale across tens and thousands of chats, right? So that's where the machines come in. And at the very basic, what we can do is we can mine chats to identify the unique customer intents for which people are chatting and the associated frequency of these intents. How many times do customers chat about, shipping or about, rewards? So we call this process query categorization. And so you can use query categorization to analyze chats, but you can do this for intents, you can do this for compliance, you can do this for positive or negative customer sentiment. And so these are easy examples, but as you get more sophisticated, you can focus on a much more wide range of events or characteristics that you want to analyze. And so this in turn can drive you to look at specific metrics that you can affect. So some of the things that we've used these techniques for are things like reducing out of scopes or improving average handle time or even reducing transfer rates to voice, right? So it's a very flexible sort of a tool once you start getting into the rhythm of how to use it and get sophisticated enough to be able to use them in different ways. Text mining, chat mining is very fundamental to the way you do data analytics at this stage. So I have a few examples again. And in this case, what we've done is, this is a cable TV company, and what we've done is we've done a simple query categorization for across thousands of chats, and that's what you can see on the left-hand side. So the issue category types are price query package, price query TV. So all of the stuff on the left-hand side. I'm sorry, this is a bit of an eye chart, but it makes a good point. And so you've got the categories on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, what we've done is we've graphed out the volume of the chats for each category that did not end up in a purchase, and then within each category, we've run another algorithm to look at why the customers have not bought in each case. So that's what you see on the right-hand side on the multicolored bar charts. I'll spare you the trouble of having to squint through this chart, but what it basically says is that what we've learned was that about 15% of the total non-sales were because of factors that were controllable by the agent himself or herself. So once we knew this information, we were really able to go back to the contact center floor and make specific, really targeted process changes, such as changes in agent training or agent staffing, or just kind of coaching in specific situations. And that was in turn, using that, we were able to drive a significant amount of improvement. So so you see how the learning loop that I mentioned comes into play between insight, action, and measurements. That's really how we instrumented this whole thing. So here's another example. Yeah. So this was, again, a wireless carrier. These guys, their customers were chatting with their agents, and then these customers were coming back again to chat, often for the same issue. So they used to measure the repeat rate, which is basically the percentage of customers who come back to chat about an issue within a certain amount of time that's elapsed after the first chat contact. And so they measured this in terms of what they call R3, or the third day repeat rate, and R30, which is the 30th day repeat rate after the first contact. So what we've done here is, as you can see, we've done a query categorization, and this is really, so it's a complex process, right? Because the reasons of contact in a chat, they're not always stated upfront. So you really need to be able to run fairly advanced algorithms and text mining models to identify just the intent and the reason for contact. And so what we were able to do was we were able to look at unique customer accounts and match repeat chat sessions by the same customer across up to a month. up to 30 days. And so based on this, we now have this overall picture of volume by repeats, by issue type, and across different time intervals, right? So this is great because basically what we did was we took a bunch of chats, which you really can't analyze as chats per se, right? And so you can't analyze them in a spreadsheet or whatever, what have you. And then what we've done is we've taken them and we've converted them into discrete units of data that you can actually start now analyzing in your more traditional kind of analytics tools, right? So what we did was, for example, here we were able to have a view that allowed us to double click into each query category and analyze it further. So for example, receiver issues, which is the first line here. Let's look at how this looks when we double click on it and look at the sub reasons behind kind of this particular contact driver, right? So what we realized was that people who are repeat connecting for receiver issues, up to 22% of them were connecting because they wanted to come back to chat to request a modification of a schedule for the technician visit that they had scheduled in the previous chat. So when we realized this, we were able to start conditioning chat agents on such chats to provide the web link for the self-service scheduler tool to the customer in the initial chat itself. Now the thing was, guys, the scheduler URL was already there, like the page was already there on the website, but it was undiscoverable. Nobody was able to find it or go to it directly. And so they were chatting with us. So once we started going through this process of kind of providing the URL upfront in the first chat itself, but once we started doing this same analysis, insight application measurement loop across all of the issue categories, etc., what we realized and what we were able to effect in aggregate was that over 3 to 4 months, we were able to significantly drive down both R3 and R30, which is the 3rd day and the 30th day repeat rate. So this is another example of how the feedback loop works. And then I have yet another example, which is a little more exotic. The metrics here are a little more exotic than what you've seen so far, and the data models are a little more sophisticated. So going beyond just conventional happy, sad style sentiment, what we can do with data models is we can train them to look for kind of a non-emotional set of cues, right? So how there's obviously when a customer says, hey, this is great, that means he's happy, or when he says this isn't really what I expected, that's a cue for a negative sentiment. But what about these sentiments that are not direct and not emotional, right? So for example, if a visitor says, can you hurry up please? And remember, he's typing this, so like a visitor, your only interaction with a visitor is just the written text. It's not the tone of voice, it's not the kind of any other verbal cues, it's completely on text, right? So if a visitor says, can you hurry up please, this expresses impatience. So it's a different kind of non-verbal cue, but it doesn't get typically caught within the standard filters of happy, sad, or whatever have you, right? So if you look at this, what we've done is there's an example where we've mined chats for a satellite TV provider, and we were looking for specific instances where an agent had made a sale attempt. Now a sale attempt, what's a sale attempt? It's basically an attempt on the part of the agent to create an incentive or a certain urgency for the customer to close the sale right now. So the agent could offer a discount or make an offer or suggest that if the customer signed and closed the deal right now, they could get installation in 2 days. So these kind of things are, it's a wide range of things that an agent would say that constitute a sale attempt. So kind of we tried to train our model to look at all of these different kinds and classify them and timestamp them. And as a result, we were able to then do analytics on this. So I'll spare you a lot of the intermediate steps, but here's the final analysis. And what the insight that we were able to achieve was really we established statistically that the top graph, for example, shows you that the agents, the likelihood of a successful conversion, it plateaued after 5 successive sale attempts. So if an agent has already made 5 successive sale attempts and the customer has not bought, that's a cue for us to start training the agents to start gracefully concluding the chat rather than to continue to make more and more sale attempts, right? So that's the first level of insight. The second level of insight, which is the second graph at the bottom, it shows what we were able to do was we were able to establish that agents who chatted for shorter durations per chat, and within those shorter durations, agents who were able to make their sale attempts earlier on in their chats were actually rewarded significantly more than their more chatty colleagues. So like in some cases as much as 10x, 11x more higher conversion rates than the colleagues in their AHT bucket who were not making sale attempts early on and oftener. So, with this kind of insight, what the contact center floor could do was really target their agent coaching better and then start coaching agents and conditioning agents to start positioning their sale attempts in a certain cadence and in a certain pattern, which in effect, drove conversions higher.
Leslie, I just want to interject. There's been some tremendous data here that you've been sharing. And just for all our listeners, I want to remind you've been listening to Leslie Joseph, the Senior Director of Product Marketing with 24/7. And again, all of these slides will be shared. You'll get a link tomorrow with the recording and also the slides, so you'll have that. But Leslie, I guess, what kind of tools are available maybe to perform this text mining of chats? Let me start there. Any suggestions, ideas there for some of the tools?
Sure. So there are tools that do text mining. In fact, basic text mining is even supported in statistical packages that people often use. So R, for example, is a statistical package that it allows you to do things like word clouds and basic sentiment and emotion analysis and all of that stuff. At 24/7, what we've done is we've developed our own internal set of tools for mining chats. We don't sell these tools standalone, but we use them to drive outcomes for customers who are on our platform. And the reason why we felt the need to develop a specialized toolkit is because, so a chat, right, it's not just a plain wall of text. So it differs from a social media post or a forum post by a member or something like that, because a chat conversation is a dialogue between an agent and a customer, and it progresses in very specific stages. And so given that it's a very special sort of text, it needs to be analyzed uniquely. Also, in our case, a specialized chat mining tool gave us all sorts of flexibility to leverage advanced models, the kind of exotic metrics that I showed you. So that kind of stuff. But you guys probably don't need this at this stage. What matters really is for you to be able to take a mass of unstructured data and extract from it a set of structured parameters that you can start manipulating and you can start analyzing in whichever way you want. And that scales really well. All you need to do is to be able to add the right kind of data, the right kind of predictive models. But for baseline analysis, simple tools should also support the basic level sentiment, etc., that you want to do.
Okay. No, well said, and I appreciate that. And by the way, for our listeners, I see a number of questions are coming in. I promise at the end of the session we'll go to the question box here. There's been some great questions being asked and shared with us. And one other quick question before we move on, Leslie, is that I know earlier you mentioned, I think it was called the Golden Journey, or I think it was Golden Journey. Are there specific journeys better suited for chat than, say, email or voice, in your opinion?
Great question, Chad. So, well, generally speaking, you always want to provide support to your customers pretty much in the moment and within the channel that they're already in, right? Because every time a customer breaks from one channel or has to move from one channel to another seeking support, there's a significant drop in NPS. So, given that today most customers are starting intent-driven journeys on the web and often landing up on your website, you want to keep them there and resolve them in the website as much as you can. So the real question is, which journeys can you deliver automated support to, either through a smarter website or through some sort of a virtual agent, so that chat becomes the first line of support or your safety net when this automated help fails, right? So that said, you also want to look at enabling more and more journeys to be resolved on chat. So what you want to do is you want to reduce your out of scope on chat. So you want to bring more and more journeys under the fold of chat. So you may start with a classic sales journey from product to cart to checkout. And in that, you may start using chat to minimize leakage. But over time, you may want to start using analytics, using data to find out what other journeys are showing high deviation from the golden journey. And over time, you want to be able to cover these journeys as well. So I think it really depends. There's no standard, here are 5 journeys that make a lot of sense for chat. It differs and depends on the kind of behavior and the kind of golden journey analysis results for your business, for your website, as we see.
Okay. No, thank you very much, and again, great insight. I don't want to interrupt, so I'll let you keep going here, but I want to ask a couple quick questions there.
Sure, that's awesome. So just trying to move the slide. I think my slide is stuck.
There you go. Race day?
Okay, race day. So chat analytics is great. It's a flexible framework, but at this point, it's still limited by being restricted to one channel, and it's mostly in retrospect. It's kind of looking back at all the chats that have happened, and based on that, making certain assumptions. But once a chat is done, you can only analyze it in retrospect. You can't actually change the outcome, right? So think about a situation where you could apply analytics with a more holistic view of the data, rather than just looking at the chat channel. And so that's really, in fact, that's kind of the holy grail, right? Because that's where the focus is for a lot of companies that are trying to transcend individual channel silos and become truly omni-channel. So it's about omni-channel analytics, and that's the first big idea in your advanced stage. Secondly, it's also about moving from looking at just aggregate level analysis, zooming down to the level of each individual uniquely, and then getting to the point where every single chat matters and every single chat presents opportunities that you can impact in real time. So I'll show you some of the more advanced techniques. These are not techniques, they're more technologies that we leverage and use, which in turn use data to make chat more effective. But I must point out before I move forward, you need to have a technology platform, you need to have a customer experience platform that supports these capabilities at scale if you want to truly benefit from the impact of these capabilities. Okay, so here's an example. So what we've done here is we've been able to mine chats for intent, and then we've been able to create mashups of the chat chat intent categories with the information from other unique channels and customer data. So for example, the web, the virtual agent, the IVR. So what we've done is we've used a link property, and what a link property could be something like a user ID, a customer ID, or something like that, which allowed us to kind of connect behavior and presence on one channel with the same presence and the same behavior on the same customer's presence and behavior on a different channel, right? And so through this, we were able to build an omni-channel view of customers as they move from channel to channel. So they show up on the web, then they interact with the virtual agent, then they chat with us, and then they finally end up on the IVR. So we can follow them in across their journey from channel to channel with real data. And so when we are basically armed with this kind of information, what we can do is we can make every single channel, which includes chat, more targeted to the customers based on their omni-channel context and their recent journey, and not just what you've seen, the snapshot that you've seen right now on the website itself. So here's another example, and this is actually one of my favorite examples. It's if you think of about the chat funnel, right? There are a ton of things that you can do, a ton of various techniques that you can apply at every single stage to make each stage significantly more productive and effective. So what this is focused on is the chat invitation, so maximizing the acceptance rate of the chat invitation that you present to a customer. And it's also a great example of how data analytics intersects with design. We call this design of experiments. And what we basically do is we are able to isolate the different combinations of UI elements on a chat invite. So this chat invite you see here, it's got several properties, several UX properties, right? So there's the message, there's the font, there's the placement on the page, there's the layout, whether it's vertically aligned or horizontally aligned, there's the colors, there's all of that, the button format, etc. So all of these are unique elements, and what we can do is we can evaluate the statistically significant combinations of all of these UX elements and come up with a set of options, a set of variations that we think are the most statistically significant. So in this case, these are 6, or there may be 8 variations that are the most statistically significant. And once we have that, we can now start doing multivariate tests. So we can show each invite, each variant to a random group, a random population of people, of targets on your website, to see which one drives the maximum acceptance rate. And as a result, we've done this for a bunch of clients. We've seen acceptance rates improve by as much as 70 to 80%, and in turn conversion by as much as 20%. But that's just one stage of the funnel, and so we've got techniques for every single stage, right? So when all of these things start stacking up, what you get is a much more effective, much more productive funnel, the chat funnel itself. And then that's kind of stage one. Stage two is really taking it to the next level, is really about personalization at an individual level. So once you take design of experiments and you add it to kind of a personalization framework, then what you're really seeing is you can look at each customer's journey and you can predict their intent and then serve them a contextual invite with a message, with a call to action that is directly linked to that intent, and that in turn drives even higher acceptance rates or higher, whatever the metric is at that point that you're trying to impact at that stage of the funnel. So here's a different example. What this is text mining at scale. I've already spoken about it. It allows us to do several things. In this case, what we're using it for is direct agent performance management. So what we're doing here is this is a tool that we use internally for chat operations. What we do is we are able to score every single chat hitting your contact center, and it's not just across more of the quantitative metrics, but it's also about qualitative metrics. Like, for example, we can train chat mining models to look for behavioral attributes such as, how responsive is an agent, or how much empathy did he or she show, or what kind of product knowledge do they demonstrate when they're talking to customers, right? So we can score these kind of traits using algorithms that are specifically trained to look for these kind of attributes. And once we have these, and once we have the quantitative parameters as well, we can allow managers to really look at this information, and they can slice and dice it in all sorts of ways. And this really allows them to start spending less time kind of pouring through Excel sheets. But what they can do is they can take these nuggets of information, these nuggets of insight, and they can tailor staffing plans based on these real insights. And then so what we do is we allow them to step back, and instead of looking at just aggregate data from a bunch of chats within a queue, what we are saying is now you can apply this to the level of an agent to improve each agent's performance, or you can even cluster agents into behavioral groups across queues, which can, the kind of agents who have similar development needs or similar, staffing properties, etc. And then you can start getting very granular in terms of how you approach training, staffing, performance management, etc. So I'm still at this point talking about post-facto analysis, but let's see what happens when we start pushing some of this insight into real time. So what we can do now is we can mine chats on the fly. So text mining models, in this case, what they're doing is they're basically making sense of a chat as it progresses. So how I mentioned earlier on in this presentation that a chat has different stages. So what we've made our models do is they are now aware of which stage a chat is in, along with what the content of the conversation at that point is, right? And so as a result, what we can do is we can use these same algorithms to, within our agent console, start providing agents with a stream of recommendations in real time based on the context, the content, and the stage of the chat that they're in. And so this is a really flexible framework. It can be used to provide all sorts of guidance to the agent. Like, the easiest and the most obvious is monitoring compliance. So if an agent is supposed to, for example, say a certain mandatory set of, narrate a set of mandatory statements to the customer, or if they are supposed to collect the email ID from a customer or something like that, we can train these models to continuously monitor the chat. And if the algorithm decides and determines that the chat is closing, but the agent has not yet asked some of these mandatory questions or asked for certain mandatory information, it can prompt the agent saying, hey, have you asked for the email ID? That kind of stuff. So it's a really flexible framework, and it applies to things like, product cross-sell or upsell, or even, things like cross-pollinating best practices across agents. So one of the things that we've been seeing consistently is that we are able to use recommendations to drive up the ramp time for new agents. It's almost like the best way to think about it is if you had a coach standing behind every single agent and kind of providing helpful suggestions on what to do next, or coaching them on how to take certain kinds of chats, etc. But only in this case, it's not a real coach. It's just a piece of software. So that's recommendations. And so that really brings us to the close of this presentation. I hope I've been able to provide some good insight and some ideas to get your get you to put on your training shoes and go out running and get your chat fitness on. So a few parting thoughts and a few kind of suggestions on how to move forward. So in the world where we are headed, chat is really going to be core to a customer contact strategy. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be fundamental because as people start using the text medium to communicate with each other, and text messaging, whether that may be SMS or it be things like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, etc., becomes mainstream for the generations of customers. Chat's going to be fundamental as a way to connect with this kind of demographic. And so really the difference between an average, a good, and a really exceptional chat program is going to be how companies leverage data. So really start thinking strategically about building data as a core capability. So we've shown in this presentation there is stuff that you can do no matter which level of chat maturity you may be at. So our advice would be start recommending with data analytics with what you have today, even if it's just weblogs, right? But then what you need to do is while you're building for, while you're focused on today, also keep an eye on the future, so the overall capability, and build a roadmap towards a more detailed data strategy that can serve you from a chat perspective, but also from a customer experience perspective in a more broad way for the next 2 to 3 years. And then finally, just to reiterate what I mentioned in the beginning, the Insight Action Measurement Framework, this is a great way to kind of systematically drive very direct, very attributable impact, even in, and especially in a small scale before you move forward and kind of scale up. And this is irrespective of where you start. I've used this framework to show you several examples, so I hope that this really, you got a sense and an appreciation of how you could use it in your own chat program as well.
Well, Leslie, fantastic, and first of all, I need a new pair of running shoes, and this all sounds great. I know we've got a number of questions that have come in, and I have a couple quick ones I wanted to ask you with the time we have left, and let's just jump into some questions here. One of mine was, before we get into the audience questions, is how do you build a business case for chat using data? Kind of a big question, but if you had to sort of simplify or narrow that down, would you have any suggestions for our listeners?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. So I think a few guidelines. So think about what metrics you're really trying to impact and what are the levers that drive these metrics. So if you're looking at sales chat, your metrics may be revenues, and so the levers may be specific funnel metrics such as hot lead rates or conversion rates. Or if you're running a service chat program, you may be looking at, like I mentioned the earlier example in this presentation, the cost of service, right? And so as a result, you may look at levers like resolution rate or in-scope chats. And so when you start looking at these levers and you estimate how much you can improve your levers using the chat processes and data and analytics, if you can use these to model and quantify the value and thus build your overall business case, then that's like that's a good place to start. And obviously you can hone it based on any other variables that you may have. So that if you're starting cold, but then if you have an existing chat program, you can always start with your the existing numbers that your current chat platform is putting out, and then you can start adding things like maybe if you scale from X number of chats to X 30% more number of chats, how is that going to impact specific metrics, and then where are the opportunities to apply analytics, and how does that impact your metrics and therefore your outcomes. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're building the business case.
Perfect. I want to get into a couple questions from our attendees here, our listeners. One of them is asking, could we apply this analysis to attempts made by call reps to end the chat? For example, how many attempts does it take to close a chat? Any thoughts on that question that's being asked?
Okay, so that's a nice, interesting question. You can absolutely use these techniques to find out how many attempts it takes to close a chat, what the optimal number is, etc. You obviously have to have a model and train a model specifically to look for these closure attempts. What you also want to ensure is that while it's great to close a chat that you think is going on, dragging on too long, what's the impact from a CSAT or an NPS perspective, right? And so while we have to strike the right balance between, hey, you don't want long chats that go on endlessly, but you also don't want to close the chat in a fashion that has a detrimental impact on NPS. So I think you can use data in both situations in both ways. One, you can use models to identify closure attempts and then correlate these with NPS or CSAT or even other variables or other outcomes from a service perspective, and then kind of find out what that balance is and therefore kind of affect the kind of training changes or conditioning changes with agents that you need to do to drive shorter, more effective chats. So absolutely you can do it.
Okay. And Edward wants the crystal ball from you. Do you ever see chat being completely automated, no human, and driven by analytics? What would be your prediction or best prediction, I guess, on that? You think so?
Yeah, we can all. So yes, we'd love to get to that point, wouldn't we? But I don't think that's going to ever be real. What we can do is I think we will get to a point, closer and closer to a point where automation becomes really more effective, especially as automation through virtual agents, for example, is a great example where what's happening is that if you've noticed over the past few years, virtual agents have become far more conversational, far more context aware than they used to be. And the impact of that is obviously automation is going to increase. So where we had less than 10% of automation within customer care, we're going to see more and more of that. We're also going to see kind of logic for conversational virtual assistants extend from the web to the IVR and back. But what's not going to diminish, I think, what's not going to go away completely, definitely, is the need for human intervention, because there are situations where stuff falls through the cracks and people and the robots, the bots are not able to resolve the interaction as effectively as they should, and in which case you want to have a very strong kind of a safety net, which is really what at the end of the day chat or even voice calls really are. They're the safety net to the automated interaction, and so it may become less important. It may become quantitatively less than what it is today. But what is going to end up happening is that agents are going to be even more important in that situation, because they are the last port of call before the customer kind of gives up, right? So that's going to be the role of chat in the near future.
Well, perfect for that insight and thought. Quick question, Teresa wants to know, do you have any use cases for financial services? If you do, Leslie, you and I can get in touch, and I'll get you and Teresa in touch, and you can go from there. But if you have any use cases for financial services, Teresa would be interested in that, okay?
Oh, absolutely. Please do get in touch with me, and we can talk about it. We have tons of examples.
Okay. I just want to make a last question from some of the attendees here. Mark's asking, first of all, Mark's glad to hear that companies are moving up the curve from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and I would agree with your sentiment when I asked you that question, by the way. But Mark's want to know, do you find that businesses are investing in the human analyst resources to leverage the tools and data to actually conduct analysis and drive improvement projects based on the results? Any thoughts or insight there?
That's a great question. We have actually seen a lot of investment, and a bunch of that investment is primarily because companies have required, the vendor side tools available and the capabilities available to drive the kind of impact that they claim to deliver have just not been up to the mark. So, for example, we know situations where chat providers, they've said that they've claimed that they've got the best business rules in the world, but then the reality is that a lot of our customers, some of our customers have, even in the recent past before they moved to us, they've been spending as much as $500,000 just on people, manpower that they employ to actively manage the business rules that of the chat platform that they were on. There are situations, and a lot of these times it is about the inefficiency of the existing tools and capabilities, which prompt companies like yourself to have to invest in these manpower resources to drive the kind of analysis that you require. So that's something that we as an industry could get significantly better at, and I think change is coming. So for example, just some simple things like the move from business rules to predictive models is a huge leap, because once you move from rules to models, models are self-correcting, they are flexible, they adapt very easily to changing business conditions, and so you don't really actively need to employ people to actively manage every single rule on every single page, because a lot of the stuff that it takes people to do on the modeling side of the business, on the rule side of the business, models can just automatically take care of. So change is coming. Hold in there.
Perfect. And Javier, by the way, yes, there will be a link shared tomorrow. Everyone will get an email tomorrow with the recording and all the slides, and you'll also be getting an email shortly with a survey from today's session. I'd love to get your feedback from today's session and insights. Leslie, before I turn it in close, I just want to make a couple of quick announcements to our members. Our next leadership gathering, I hope you can join us. The Customer Response Summit will be in Austin, September 18th through the 20th. It is a great two-day forum where we do deep dives around the whole omni-channel, multi-channel experience. You can find much more details on our leadership gathering in Austin on execsintheknow.com, and I would encourage, if you haven't attended, come out and join us. We are offering a 50% off on first-time attendees. As we said earlier, there's a number of ways for our community to stay involved. execsintheknow.com here. We're here to advocate your success. And as I said in the beginning, Leslie, you and your organization have been tremendous business partners in our community, helping advance the learning and sharing and growing of the overall success of multi-channel customer engagement. We could not have been more pleased with the number of things you folks have done to help our community, and a lot of your customers are in our community, so thank you again for that. Without further ado, Leslie, I sincerely want to thank you. I really enjoyed today's session. What I really took away was some great examples. I love when our speakers provide use case studies and examples, so I think you definitely hit that out of the park and well appreciated. If you need to get a hold of Leslie, or if you want to get a hold of 24/7, you can reach me, Chad, at execsintheknow.com, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with them. Without further ado, everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Leslie, you've been a great guest. Thank you for participating in with our community.
Thank you, Chad, and thanks everybody for joining. I hope this was useful to you guys.
Perfect. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and thank you again, and you'll be getting links to the show in the webinar here very shortly. Have a great day. This will now conclude our webinar. Thank you.